happy Tuesday. And boy, do we have a great guest. We were talking before about how do you make that transition to assisted living welcoming? And our guest has got some really cool ideas, a phenomenal story as to the things that he saw and what they're tackling with their company, Joe and Bella. So I'm going to turn it over to Taylor, who is going to introduce our wonderful guest.
Thank you, Francis, and happy Tuesday, everyone. This is Jimmy from Joe and Bella. Jimmy, thanks for being on this show.
Thanks for having me, Taylor and Francis. Excited to talk. Excited to be here.
We are too. It's a great conversation I think we're going to have, and I would love to get us started. Will you tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do?
Yeah, so really quick background. I'm here in Chicago with all the snow, but I guess there's snow everywhere at this point. I have a tech startup background. So I was one of the first salespeople at Grubhub out of Chicago before launching a startup called Collaborata, which is a marketplace for consumer related data. And at Collaborata, we started focusing on aging and caregiving and seniors and doing a lot of really phenomenal work with AARP. But at the same time, we were dealing with caregiving on the personal side. My grandmother and grandfather moved into an assisted care community back in 2012. So it was this sort of interesting professional meets personal lifestyle. And through that experience, which I'm sure we'll get into, we launched Joe and Bella, which is a service that just makes caregiving a little bit easier. It's a place where anyone can go to get anything from clothing to tech to everyday essentials like toiletries for their loved one, whether they're in an assisted care community, whether they're receiving care at home, or whether or not you just want to give them a great gift. Cool. There it is.
Yeah, there it is. Pulling it right up here right now. Just to kind of give a little idea of, kind of what you guys do here, this site. I mean, it's pretty interesting. I think the approach that you guys were taking. So kind of where was some of the, I guess, motivation to look into this? I mean, this is pretty creative.
Yeah, I appreciate that. So back in 2012, we moved our grandparents into assisted care. My grandmother at the time had mobility issues. She was in a wheelchair because of a couple hip surgeries, and my grandfather was suffering from Parkinson's and dementia. And we were sort of weighing the choice of whether or not we should move them in. And we had gone and visited all the different care communities throughout Chicagoland. We had nailed down which one we liked best, but we were still delaying that decision. But again, when you sort of delay that decision, what happens is something happens. And my grandmother fell again. And we probably delayed a week longer than we should have. And we waited last minute, and so last minute, in fact, that it was Christmas Eve 2012 when we officially moved them in. So 8 p.m. Christmas Eve, packing her up, moving her in. It was a stressful, scary, daunting night. And the whole time, even though we knew was what was probably best for her, that she get professional caregivers to be by her side 24/7, it was a moment in time where we still didn't know if we were doing the right thing. And we remember sort of going through her closet and just thinking, is everything here? What else do we need? Can someone give us a checklist? Can someone help make this transition a little bit easier? And that was sort of the first time where we thought about creating a service like Joe and Bella. But throughout her stay, I can talk about hundreds of different times where this would have come in handy.
Yeah, let's talk about, because that I'd say that almost family guilt. I mean, that was, a big factor for our family as well. Is it's like this sense of responsibility that is always there, but then all of a sudden it ramps up to this guilt where it almost stops you from making the decision, because it's like, well, I'm letting mom down or my grandmother down, right? I mean, that's tough to deal with.
It really is, and it weighs on you. You everyone wants to take care of their loved ones to their best of their ability, and for us, our ability was we're not professional caregivers, we're not nurses, we're not doctors. We don't know how to treat someone with dementia. We can't even ensure that she didn't fall down as best we could, and as much sort of great tech devices that we put in there and ensured that she even had a caregiver there 24/7. So it was a decision that weighed on us, and we probably waited too long. What I can say is the one thing that we did right was we did our homework. We
Hmm.
went and visited at least a dozen different
Wow.
communities.
Wow.
Probably way too many, but it was
You did your
worthwhile.
homework.
Yeah, we talked to the executive directors. We got to see the place. We got to
Right.
see the rooms. We got to meet the caregivers, and that was probably the most important part, and probably the deciding factor for the place that we moved her in at, was just having a connection with those caregivers, and knowing and trusting in them, and in how watching them interact with the people that were already living there
That's pretty
was
cool.
reassuring.
That's really cool. Where did the name Joe and Bella come from? I want to ask because I didn't. Was that yeah? Where did that name come from?
So the night we moved in for my grandparents, we were getting a tour, and we noticed that two of the residents had kind of tagged onto our tour.
Okay.
And eventually, one of them, Bella, has the biggest personality. She's 96 now,
Wow.
and she had decided to take over the tour from the caregiver, and
Okay.
was showing us around, and was really funny, making lots of jokes, and then let us know that it was the first night of Hanukkah, I believe, and she invited us over to light the candles with her, and we had this really special moment with her and Joe.
Wow.
We later found out that Joe and Bella were Holocaust survivors who met each other later in life. Both had the tattoo, both had incredible stories that have now since been documented. And they ended up becoming part of our family. They had every meal from there on out. They ate with my grandparents. They came over for Thanksgiving and birthdays and Mother's Day and Father's Day. And so for us, by using their name, it's sort of a constant reminder of why we're doing this, because
Cool.
they made us feel welcome. They made us feel better than when we left, and that's kind of how we want to give back. That's how we want to help.
That is incredible, and it brings me back to that family guilt piece that you first experienced when you were moving them in, and then when you got there, and it really shows that there is a sense of community, and not only community but family there as well.
Absolutely, and that's what the best communities do. It's, you're living with 10, 20, sometimes up to 60 to 100 for the mega communities, different people. And my grandmother was picky.
Yeah.
We were concerned that she wasn't going to make friends. So having someone like Bella really become part of the family was so meaningful.
Yeah. I like to call it, we turn it into a functional family, right? Because
I love that.
I mean, you're really taking personalities and trying to give them that true sense of home, as this is their next chapter,
Right.
Not the final chapter, but the next one. And I think that there are new opportunities that are going to come from it. And that would be my hope for our listeners, is don't look at moving someone into an assisted living as the end. Look at it as just the next step, because we don't know where life's going to take them, or even us for that matter. And that's what I would hope for all of us, is that we look more optimistically at making these moves versus pessimistically, oh, we got to move mom in, or I've got to drop her off. Want to get away from that language almost.
That's right. And it's funny. We even put together sort of a cheat sheet of language that we want to eliminate, because so much of the language around this age group, around assisted care, is negative and has like these really gross subconscious biases. So we refuse to say the word facility. We refuse to say things like elder. There are just ways in which we describe this community that we want to be really conscious of, because I think that language, as you're right, saying you're dropping someone off, that's not the case. It's saying we're actually moving our grandparents closer to where we lived. We were able to see them a lot more. Right. It was a very good thing for them. And I think people who make that decision, as tough as it is, need to feel good about and reassured that you are doing what's best for your loved one.
Absolutely.
It brings back that whole piece of when you had that transition, when you were moving them in and moving them closer to you, right? You wanted a checklist of not only what they needed, but what they wanted, right? Can you tell us more about that experience?
Yeah, absolutely. So for the needed part, we know they needed all of their toiletries were there. and make sure just like the basics were taken care of. And my grandmother was very specific about the toothpaste brand she used, the mouthwash she used. So getting the exact right one was tricky. She liked Biotin, and not every like CVS or Walgreens always has Biotin. So we had to know which one in our neighborhood was going to carry it.
Right.
But also knowing that, hey, the community that she moved to kept their temperature about 3 degrees colder than what she would like her home to be.
Huh.
And so just getting an extra couple of shawls, a thicker blanket, those type of things were really meaningful. As far as things that she wanted, she always wanted Werthers, and she always wanted crossword puzzles.
All right.
Even later in life, she started suffering from dementia because she could still do a crossword puzzle with the pen, but making sure that she didn't run out of the crossword puzzles or a Sudoku was really, really important.
That's awesome. Before the show and kind of we were going over some notes here, you brought up something that was really interesting to me is challenges and solutions for providing care for that your loved one that's remotely, whether it's because you live out of state or far away or because of COVID. So can you tell us a little more about some of that? Because that seems to be a lot of concern, I think, right now in the senior space, right? Is, how do I do that? How do I manage that?
Right. We were really fortunate that we lived about a 10 to 15 minute drive away as long as there was no snow. So for those of you that care for a loved one and you're in different states or across the country, we're now experienced, or we experienced for a little bit what that was like due to COVID, and it is a much different challenge. So once COVID hit about a year ago, our community that my grandmother was at the time went full lockdown. So even if you had negative tests and PPE, you couldn't come through the door, obviously. Right. So we no longer had the benefit of going in her closet. We had no longer the benefit of seeing her nails and made sure that she had a manicure or going in her bathroom and seeing what was there. And then to add to that, she was starting to suffer from dementia. So we couldn't also rely on her word. She would tell us that she needed things that we knew she had, or she would ask for things that maybe she needed, but we weren't totally sure. So it was a challenge. So part of what we do at Joe and Bella for things like essentials and toiletries that are consumable that you're going to run out of, we just set it up as a recurring order so that you never have to worry about that going away. We're also partnering with a bunch of really great tech companies that just make that process easier. So one of the biggest challenges, especially when during COVID, for someone who has memory care issues, FaceTiming and phone calls can be a challenge. My grandmother just didn't totally understand FaceTime. She wasn't able to work a smartphone totally. So we partnered with a company called we used at the time a company called GrandCare that makes really great tablets for seniors that allows you to just pop on into the screen of the tablet. So it's a no pick up device. And so that way it was sort of always positioned to where she was always sitting. We could check in. If there was a caregiver in, she can give us a tour of the room. And it just made life so much easier. And it felt like you were having that sort of in-person conversation, or as close to it as you can get during COVID.
That's cool. That's really cool. And did that add more peace of mind having this tech in? Like, how did that feel for you guys as the family? Did that bring a sense of peace? Or?
It was such a relief. So for the first 3 to 4 weeks of COVID, we didn't have anything. And the caregivers at their community were phenomenal. And we had their cell phone numbers, and we could occasionally text them and say, hey, can we caregive, or can we FaceTime with grandma at 2:00? And they would do that for us. But the caregivers have so much on their plate during COVID, and it didn't always work out, or you felt guilty doing it. So being able just to check in and see the entire room and be able to talk to her whenever, because she was very tight on a schedule, just made things so much easier and was a really, really big relief.
That's awesome. That I can imagine, because that's the big thing for us is communication. Taylor obviously, agrees with that, is that connection between families and residents and staff that has to be as fluid as possible. So everyone knows what's going on with essentially their best friends, right? They have to know that information, and COVID can't be a reason why communication breaks down. It needs to make it stronger in my eyes.
Absolutely. That's why something like Serenity would have been so nice to have and set up in place going into COVID, to have that sort of flow of communication ready to go. It would have been we would have been super grateful to already have something like that in place.
I think it also, with higher communication or more thoughtful communication, you start to look at the whole person as well.
Hmm.
I think that's a big opportunity for these technologies bringing into senior care and things like that. That you can start to look at the whole person, wherever they are, whether they start developing dementia or go on hospice, whatever that looks like. You look at the entire person and the best care that you can give from all parties, which is something I'm really passionate about.
Yeah. I, that, and Jimmy, I mean, what do you think? I mean, before the show, we were talking about the challenges of professional caregivers. What do you think? I mean, in your opinion, are going to be some of the bigger, global challenges? I mean, that 30,000 foot view that we're going to be facing for the next 5-10 years is we need to provide better services for older adults.
Right. So yeah, this is something that I'm really passionate about. So the 30,000 foot view is, as boomers age and boomers become the generation that's going to be receiving care,
Mhm.
we are going to be at a caregiving deficit that the world has never seen before, that this country is totally unprepared for. We need more people going into caregiving. We need more programs to help train professional caregivers, and frankly, we need more government resources to help right now protect those care communities that are doing things the right way, as well as potentially even invest in communities that are coming up about thinking about how do boomers want to be taken care of differently than the generations before them. Because look, my grandparents were never tech savvy, and they were happy to be in a community that was not tech savvy and had none of that.
Right.
However, I know going forward, when I'm 90 years old, I'm probably going to want tablets. I'm probably going to want to be able to shout out at Alexa and tell me what pills I've taken.
Yep.
I know I'm going to want that tech
Right.
there and have a tech enabled community in a way that doesn't exist right now. So to get off the soapbox a little bit, is that we don't have enough caregivers, and
Yeah.
our caregivers that are doing a phenomenal job right now um, aren't receiving the type of support that they need. And I think there's just so much as a country that we need to be doing to help them, to support them, and as well as look at the long run picture of where we need to go.
I almost kind of look at, I go back to, I love, without getting too geeky. I have a physics degree, so I have a lot of that, that tech stuff. And then I have a lot of, science as well too. But I was fascinated by the energy of the country put in the space race from like basically the early 60s to 69 to get that person to the moon. And we put the best and brightest together to attack whatever challenges. There was a lot of setbacks, but some really cool things developed, right? And I feel we almost kind of need that same energy when we talk about how we build this future of aging for the country, and be that that light, that shining light here again of how we can balance both the right environments but also the right tools and systems and support for those teams that are providing those care.
Yeah, and I like the way that you talk about the space race, because it is that scale of a challenge.
Mhm.
I don't think that's overselling it at all. And I think part of the issue is, in the last 5 years, there have been really maybe two venture capital firms in the country that focus on aging and focus on making products for this group. There just isn't the private side investment in this space. And although I'm a capitalist at heart, this is my second business. The government putting its resources behind this space is really, really important, and we need to get a move on.
And I think it shows, where you look at, Alzheimer's research funding compared to cancer research funding. You start looking at that. There's stark difference in dollars given, and I'm right or wrong. I'm for obviously both of those researchers, but I do think we have to be able to acknowledge the way we welcome, babies into the world is fantastic. We've got phenomenal resources, but how we welcome people out of the world, we definitely need to step our game up a lot. And I don't think it's just us. I think it's a global issue that we need to be learning best practices from those around the world, because I think there are great things
Yeah.
that we can learn from different cultures on how they honor their older adults, and the reverence and some of those things that we can all use to support essentially a very big aging population throughout the world.
Yeah, you're totally right. There's like the macro stuff that we can be doing about investment dollars in Alzheimer's and dementia research, and as well as investing in tech solutions and building phenomenal new communities. We were talking prior to this about the idea of building massive campuses that have specialized level of care on the individual level based upon what you need, which is phenomenal, and that's starting to pop up across the country, but not at the scale or the speed that we really need it to. So we can still look at, you're right, some of these other countries, I think Canada does a really good job with the healthcare system to ensure that those with lower means don't have to worry about paying for a vaccine or don't have to worry about getting a COVID test even. I know there are some states who are concerned that up to 65% of their care communities are going to go under. A big reason is that it is not just lower occupancy rates, but higher costs due to COVID, particularly when it comes to testing that is coming out of their own pocket.
Tell me one second. I want to say, you said 65% of potentially closing.
Yeah. So to expedite, hey, there are all these new people that are going to need care. According to the New York Times, they came out with a report about 3 weeks ago saying nationally, roughly 65% of all care communities in the country are going to close as a result of COVID. Wow. And that's a combination of occupancy is down. No one's really moving into communities at the same rate as they did prior to COVID, but also their expenses are way up. They're paying more for their caregivers. They're paying more for cleaning equipment. They have far new protocols in place, but also paying for testing. They're doing a lot of that out of pocket, which is not easy.
No. Wow. I did not. Whew. That's big numbers. Those are big numbers.
It's horrible.
It amplifies what you were saying before too about a caregiver shortage, but also a bed shortage as well.
Absolutely.
Well, and I think too is we need to be able to, as an industry here, begin to not just, COVID was a punch in the face, right? And I think we need to do better at being punched in the face. And I know it might sound stupid, but adaptability, I think, is paramount in this industry. Being able to pivot and adapt to whatever, because this is not going to be the first pandemic we're going to face. I think it's only going to become something that's maybe not to this scale, but I think it's going to be having bigger impacts across the healthcare sphere, especially for older adults, that we have to, learn and be ready to adapt and be okay with being uncomfortable, figuring it out, and not be so hard on ourselves and others that we don't always have to have the answer, but we have to be willing to work for the answer.
Yeah, I love that. And you're right. The COVID was really tough on caregiving community. Still is. And the press that they got about it has mostly been really, really negative. And look, those first few months, depending on the specific states that you look at and sort of look under the hood, were really bad. Right. But there are also some phenomenal success stories. I know locally here in Chicago, there are several communities there that didn't receive a single positive test this entire time. So I just wish like those stories could be amplified, and those sort of processes that work could be shared cross state line in ways that they weren't really at the beginning of the pandemic.
Agree 100%. I think, before we kind of transition to kind of some of our closing questions here, I think what you're doing in this idea of pushing technology to solve some of the challenges here, we need more of those creative ideas. Right now, I firmly believe there's not an idea that we can think of for senior care that we shouldn't at least begin to really look at trying. I think it's in its infancy of welcoming creative tech or creative ideas, because it has been kind of still built off the early models of the 40s and 50s with those first nursing homes. We've just made them look a little better and call them a little different. But I think now with, things that you're doing and other, tech providers are doing, I think there's opportunities here that are going to be really beneficial to all of us who are aging.
Yeah, and if there are any people who work in venture capital who see this or listen to this, my push to you is that this is going to be a massive space.
Yeah.
That a lot of you want to invest in Gen Z focused products, and I get it because that's what's hot, that's what's sexy. But there is so much opportunity here. I strongly recommend thinking about doing some sort of scout fund amongst individual VCs, specifically looking at aging, because you're right, there is no idea too crazy that if you didn't throw 100K checks at a bunch of 25-year-olds who are thinking of really creative ideas to solve some of these tech-enabled issues, it would make a really big difference.
And that brings up. Well, sorry, Taylor. Real quick, I gotta.
Yeah.
The group, is it Gen X? That's from 65 to 80. Is that what's considered the Gen X group? Is that
so? That's technically Boomer, and then Gen X is the generation in between Boomer and Millennial.
Okay, because I read an interesting Wall Street Journal article how the people born between 1965 and like 1980 are being left off of a lot of these ads, even though they have the most dollars to spend for trying to get them to look at it. So I kind of resonate, Jim, what you're saying here is it's time to start looking. That's a very powerful group that is used to both ways without technology, but also ways with technology. So they know both worlds, right? The pre-tech boom and the post-tech boom, and it can have a very big impact.
Absolutely.
Don't forget about those people, is what I'm saying.
Yeah, they're the sandwich generations. They're likely caring for a loved one or a parent at this point, and they probably have kids of their own. Mm-hmm. They've been professionals for 30 plus years. They have disposable income. So absolutely right.
Yeah, I think it's a great opportunity here to make this industry, make this space better too. I always say, and I love bringing people like you, Jimmy, on the show because we get together and we get to talk about these things because we're all going to get older sometime, right? That's all going to happen for us, and we want to make it the best we can for everyone involved, and that's why we love talking to people like you. And with that, one of our questions that we love to ask every one of our guests that we bring on is, who do you consider to be a maverick in your life?
So I'm going to talk about my grandfather. So he was an entrepreneur. He his quick backstory, he fought in World War II. He had horrible eyesight, so they wouldn't actually let him on the front lines. Instead, he ran a Nazi POW camp. And he had some crazy stories. Ended up writing a book about it. But after serving in World War II, he came back and went to journalism school at Northwestern's. And he and his roommate started a book or a magazine called Shy about Chicago that eventually went under after a few editions. But one day, his roommate came back and said, "Hey, I've got a new idea for a magazine." You might actually be able to see the first edition behind me. The idea was for Playboy. So his college roommate was Hugh Hefner, and he explained.
That's amazing.
Yeah. So Hugh explained to my grandfather all about Playboy and said, "Hey, this is what it's going to be. This is the ethos. We're going to show women, but in a really positive, feminine way." And my grandfather laughed at him and said, that is the worst idea I have ever heard. It is not going to work. You're going to lose all your money. Do not do this. And so Hefner for weeks tried to get my grandfather to go 50-50 with him, but he absolutely refused. So the conclusion of the story is Hefner went out, raised some money to launch Playboy. Mm-hmm. Those first few editions, my grandfather actually wrote most of the articles under a pseudonym called Bob Norman, because my grandmother refused to let him use his actual name in it because she was so sort of horrified that he was involved in any way. But he was a maverick in how he thought about the world. He was wrong a lot, but what he would say was, don't always trust your gut, which I really like. He said, go try new things. Don't always trust your gut. And he liked his big thing was when he would be walking down to Chicago, he said, if you ever see an art studio, regardless if you have a meeting, go in there and walk in and walk around. I don't always agree with that because I don't like being late to meetings, but that was just sort of his style. He was a really interesting guy.
That's really cool. What a story. Wow.
Yeah, right there.
I mean, the Hugh Hefner. I mean, that's really cool. That's so awesome.
Yeah, it was pretty cool. After my grandfather passed, we actually got to reach out to Hugh's people and get a quote from Hugh because they had been estranged for years. But Hugh gave a really gracious quote that we got to read and put in the newspaper, and
That's really cool.
it was special. So that's my grandfather signed that one. That's framed up there. We never actually had Playboys for obvious reasons, and this is a story I didn't know until I was about 20.
Wow.
And so I said, Papa, you wrote in all these Playboys and you never told me about it. He's like, yeah, I'm not really allowed to talk about it. So I was set all sort of notifications on eBay for eventually finding a first edition that I could get and have him to sign. So it's
really cool.
It's sort of a fun hidden family story.
Definitely. I mean, but it also too goes to show you the connections you make in life. You don't know how they're going to unfold, right? So I'm a big believer of, explore your connections with, honor and integrity, because you never know what could be down the road in 5 years or 10 years, right? And how that can have a positive impact, on whatever your next steps in life are. So that's awesome. That's so stinking cool. So we're big on action. What action would you encourage our listeners to take or do to really kind of, make some positive movement here?
So the first thing, obviously, we've been advocating this whole time about entrepreneurs specifically in this aging space. Feel free to reach out to me. My email is simply jimmy@joeandbella.com. This is the third startup that I've been involved in. So Twitter, LinkedIn, get at me. I'm always happy to talk, always happy to help. And if you've got a product that you already have launched, we'd love to have it on Joe and Bella. If it's something that makes the lives of loved ones in residents in assisted care or the caregivers easier, we would love to list it on Joe and Bella. Cool. The second thing is, if you work at a care community or if your loved one's in a care community, we work directly with these communities themselves. So we give a little bit back. So for those communities that we partner with, all the residents and their families get a discount on the site, but we also have a caregiver appreciation fund as well. So a portion of all sales go back to the caregivers of those specific communities. And
that's awesome.
It's something that means a lot to me right now. So not to go on another story, but because of COVID, so many caregivers had to give up their second job. Yep. That they were forced to put themselves in a bubble to care for the people that we love most. Mm-hmm. And that sacrifice needs to be paid back. And so that's part of what we're trying to do at Joe and Bella.
That's awesome. Awesome. I mean, I'm glad you're thinking not only for the resident, but for that key amazing person, that care partner that's right there with them. So I give you a lot of credit for that, because they're such a key part.
Yeah, it is one of the hardest and most thankless jobs there is, particularly for those that are caregivers in memory care. It is so hard. So any way that we can give back, that's what we want to do.
Absolutely. That's fantastic. So I know I'm going to put a little message up here for anybody that's caught the show here on their first, I guess, order. I was going to say purchase order. Use the code SPARK at checkout for 10% off. Check out Joe and Bella. There's a lot of, I was on it earlier. There's a lot of cool things on there, more than you think, that can actually have a really big impact on those that are aging. I encourage you all to check it out, because there's some things on there that you're like, that doesn't make a lot of, oh, wait, actually, I can see why I would want that. So, yeah, there's some really cool things on there, and I encourage everybody to check it out and take a look.
Awesome. I appreciate it. And if there's anything that we're missing, let us know. We're just getting off the ground, and we're growing and we're learning, and we're here to help.
Awesome. Well, Jimmy, thank you so much for coming on, sharing your story. We really appreciate all you're doing. And also, the time you gave us today. This was very enlightening, and I think really, really cool to see the direction you're going in and all the positive impact you're going to have.
This was a lot of fun. Francis, Taylor, thank you both for taking the time. I appreciate it. Hopefully we can do this again in a post-COVID world.
For sure. We're going to have to, and we're going to want to follow you and see how things are going, because I've only got visions that this is going to be really a huge impact in a positive way for both residents and the caregivers, which I love. So
Appreciate it.
thank you, everybody. Stay warm, because it sounds like, as Jimmy said earlier, there's a lot of the country in a little bit of cold weather. And also stay tuned to what's going on at the Mavericks. We've got some collaboration stuff going on. We've got our current collab cohort about transitions going on as well too. So stay tuned for some more information, and we will see everybody next Tuesday. Have a great rest of your week.